WWDC 2025 really put the developer in the developer conference. It's been a while since I saw Apple do this much in one event, even if liquid glass isn't what everyone's most excited about. I mean, we've all seen the memes by now, right? Welcome back, Windows 7. But all the other stuff they did, from the changes to GamePort Toolkit, enabling WebGPU for Safari by default, and don't even get me started on the open source Docker clone written in Swift. They're doing some crazy stuff. I'm going to do my best to cover as much of this as possible, but as you guys know, Apple costs me a lot of money. They've never paid me a cent, and I doubt they ever will. As such, someone has to cover the bill. So a quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive into all this crazy news. Building great UIs has never been easier. It's kind of nuts that you can take a screenshot of a UI you like, hand it to Cursor, and say, hey, can you make it look like that? And it will. The problem is you need really good screenshots, ideally ones from working UIs from great applications people already know and love. And it's hard to find good examples. I've spent a lot of my time trying to just find something that does kind of what I was looking for. And then I found today's sponsor, and my life has gotten so much easier since. Mobbin is one of those products that once I found it, I immediately went and subbed because I was blown away with how useful it was to me. They have built this incredible collection of real UI from real applications, web, mobile, or whatever else, that you can use as reference as you're building your own stuff. When you're trying to make something great, having the right inspiration is key. So what if you could just find it by clicking around? I'm working on a subscription paywall for web. Oh, look. Here, we have a ton of different options, some of which are great, some of which might not be, but we have them all as reference. Once you find one that you like, let's say we enjoy this one, you can copy the screenshot, hop over to something like V0, paste it in, say, make me a paywall that looks like this for my product, T3 chat. And look at that. It's that easy to grab a decent UI from something else. I am blown away. This is so useful for building real stuff. I'm going to be using this a ton myself, and I'm sure you guys will benefit as well. If you don't believe me, go try it out for free. Their free tier is super generous, and you can find a ton of useful things from it. Once you decide you want more, go pay the, what is it, 10 bucks a month? Yeah, 10 bucks a month. Absurdly useful. It's so good. I've been blown away. I bet you will be too. Check them out today at soydev.link/mobbin. I think it's fair to say that WWDC was pretty weird. It was an interesting event. WWDC's always been strange because it's the Worldwide Developer Conference, and it's really trying to focus on the things developers need to know, but it always goes so much further than that. And they treat it like a normal Apple announcement conference now. I mean, they just announced a redesign for all of Apple's platforms at a developer event. But that's largely because developers need to know and care about these different things. It's important for us to know as we're building applications what's going to change so that the things that we're building and the timelines that we have stay realistic. And if you're about to ship an app in September and they're going to change how everything works for building apps by September, it's something you should know. So I do appreciate Apple for putting these things out early, but at the same time, seeing my entire team install the developer beta for iOS 26 scares me a lot. So the checks and balances, you know? First, we should talk about liquid glass because it's what everybody's thinking about from this event. And it's different, to say the least. I understand the skepticism. I've seen a lot of complaints around accessibility. I hate the fact that the only time people talk about accessibility is when they want to attack something. I say as Flutter's #1 hater who uses accessibility as their main argument. Still, the contrast issues are real, but they usually require you to get yourself into a scenario that has them if they're going to be there by default, or they aren't there until you do something like scroll and get into that state. So people were complaining that they couldn't read the name iMessage at the bottom of the chat when they were about to send a text on iMessage, because when they scroll, things behind it could blur that. You know what that text says because it always says that, even when there is nothing behind it. So it's not really a big deal. I think this would be much worse if labels that were important were becoming unreadable, like, your notifications. That all said, I can't help but look at it and just see Windows arrow. Like, it's a bit uncanny. It's hilarious how similar the vibe is, but I understand why they made the move. As someone who loves their Vision Pro and doesn't use it enough, it feels nice. It is a really modern vibe, and I don't think the accessibility problems are that bad. What is terrible is the animation times. I saw some of them on my CTO's phone because he installed it on his fucking work phone. And watching how slow everything is to fly in, seeing how much time you're spending waiting on animation, all of that, I hate it. I'm the guy who doesn't even use multiple desktops because it makes using my computer feel slower. I don't like the animations when I'm sliding between desktops. It just takes too long, in my opinion. So I don't use those features at all. I don't do anything that requires a blocking animation. I really hope they don't make me turn on reduced motion again. I've had to do it in the past and it breaks a bunch of stuff. So fingers crossed they don't go far enough where I have to do that. But honestly, I think it looks really, really good. The keyboard looks funny if you don't have suggestions on. My CTO has it off and it has a weird rounded corner. If I go to his profile, I'm sure I can see it quick. When you turn off suggestions, it makes the keyboard look awful. They also changed the positioning a little bit, so typing on it sucks. Don't like the keyboard changes. They'll probably revert those the same way they reverted the where the answer call button was when they changed that and everybody was upset. That's why they do these betas though. Talk all the shit you want to on Apple. They put this stuff out really early, so dumbasses like the people on my team will install it, hate it, give them feedback, and then they walk it back. But then they also walked back one of my favorite things, which is the Photos app. I loved the iOS 18 Photos app. I know everyone hates it. I don't care. You are wrong. I am right. I spend a lot of time going through photos and organizing content. Once you reorganize the app, because you could change where things are, it's really, really nice. And now it's 2x more clicks for me to get anywhere due to the change they just made. So I am annoyed about that one. But then there's the Safari redesign. The URL bar now will blend in to the page that you're on. So for everyone who's had issues with vertical height in Safari on mobile, it almost certainly just got worse. It's also very annoying for things like T3 chat because it covers up where the input is on the bottom. I think it looks better, but I can't help but look at it and look at the changes to the icons on the home screen and think that this is intentionally or not an attempt to harm web apps, because PWAs are getting more and more preferential treatment from governments and third parties, and Apple does not want PWAs to win. On one hand, they could make mobile apps more competitive, but they'll do instead what Apple usually does and make things worse for everyone else. Ugh. I know Dax, for example, installed the beta and set up his home screen with the new glass icons, and you'll notice two stand out. There's a reason that these two look so much worse. It's not because we gave him early access to a T3 chat beta. It's a mobile shortcut to the website, and they don't let you do these new fancy behaviors on those types of shortcuts. GeForce Now is the same because Apple does not allow for you to include game streaming in applications. So most game streaming services have had to go build web apps instead, which is really annoying. Yeah. This is funny in terms of the contrast. Apple's liquid glass rollout's actually genius. The design ensures that you can't read the comically wrong Apple Intelligence notification summaries. They really got the contrast and coloring here wrong. It's funny because this background is an official Apple wallpaper, and the reason it's having problems is it detects darker light based on the top of this. Because traditionally, darker light is used to determine what color to make, like the T-Mobile call out here, the time when it gets moved up there, power and whatnot. So they use the average color of the top bar to determine light or dark, but that means that the rest of this being light hurts because it was detected as dark due to the really dark section on the top right there, but the rest is all light. If this was like a third-party wallpaper, I would get it. But the fact this is an official Apple wallpaper using like the default Apple settings and the contrast is unreadable, this is really bad. And they do absolutely have to find ways to fix this. That is hilarious. Absolutely wild that Apple social media intern didn't proofread the liquid glass thumbnail on all devices. The YouTube icon for the preview here, introducing liquid ass. Great. Learning to check for all of these things is an art. And if you're not doing YouTube full time, you will forget and miss these types of things. Back to the icon thing for a sec. They made a whole new icon composer flow in Xcode. Is it even in Xcode? This is a whole separate app. Fascinating. Since everything has this depth to it now, a custom piece of software for making it look right seems essential. So I'm happy that they're putting the effort in to do that instead of just pretending we can do it in Photoshop because we can't. Oh, you can just download and install this separately. That's cool. Because a lot of the other things we'll talk about, I will not be able to try because I am not stupid enough to install a developer beta on my laptop, the one that I use for my work every day. Okay, enough making fun of the UI. Okay, one more thing making fun of the UI. This tweet got me thinking, Flutter is screwed. Thankfully, React Native is not. This kind of highlights the gap between React Native and Flutter even if Apple still took the opportunity to make fun of React Native during their State of the Platform thing, which was very annoying. I get why they're upset about it, but I don't like the points they make when they try to talk shit about it. Expo router and a properly set up React Native Expo app can just be rebuilt on the latest Xcode beta and have all of the new Liquid Glass stuff by default, which is good because React Native is native. Flutter is a game engine. The way Flutter does the UIs that we normally expect inside of our mobile apps is by screenshotting them and then recreating them in the app kit. So when you render something like this inside of Flutter, it's not actually calling the native notification platform to render this particular view in the app. It is inside of its weird game engine thing, rendering a fake version of it with its own text rasterization, its own touch layer, its own everything, which is a nightmare for accessibility, but more importantly, it just puts you in uncanny valley all of the time. Earlier this year, Flutter pushed an update that was supposed to make things look more proper in their Cupertino theme, which is the name of the iOS mode in Flutter. And this was the first example on this blog post. They've since replaced it and changed the blog post because I made it look so bad. I ratioed them with this post. This hurts me. If you can't see what's wrong here, I'm sure you love your Android phone a lot. And I'm sure you're very, very happy spending $1,000 on a phone that gets updates for 6 months. And I'm sure you don't notice how much worse all the other apps you use on your phone are. But for anyone with eyes, the fact the search icon is the wrong size and is aligned incorrectly is just impossible to ignore. And this being the example of them showing off how much better Flutter looks on an iPhone shows just how little they understand design in iOS. Flutter is not native. When the platform improves, they don't get the wins. They have to copy the wins with a new set of screenshots that they recreate the new UIs with. So I wish a lot of luck to them trying to recreate Liquid Glass. They're absolutely not going to be able to. And if you ever use one of those apps that's like clearly from the iOS 6 era and feels really weird and out of date on your phone, there's going to be even more Flutter apps that feel like that. They'll be uncanny valley and old. My biggest fear there is people will use a Flutter app that looks like an iOS 16 or 18 app, and they'll assume that's how all iOS 16 and 18 apps felt back in the day, when in reality, all the real apps from that era just updated to the latest build and look the new way. These ones have to look the old way because so much energy and effort was put into recreating the old behaviors. Oh yeah, classic. You can see, once again, these different notifications. There are so many little things that make theirs just feel wrong. Be it the weirdly thick bar right there, the text not quite doing spacing properly. It got a lot better. The text used to just straight up be kerned wrong, so there was too much space between letters. I'm thankful they fixed that at least. But that's after they unfucked that part of the UI, which is kind of crazy. Anyways, good luck to the Flutter devs and to the Flutter people, because when you build your own layer on top from scratch instead of hooking into the native stuff, you now have to recreate every native win. So once again, we're getting a great reminder of how miserable Flutter is if you're trying to make things that are actually nice for users to use. And thankfully, again, React Native is unaffected. I wish Apple would take a stance on this and at least let the people know that they prefer React Native to Flutter, but instead they just talk equal shit on all of them and kind of ignore Flutter in the first place. Yeah. One last thing on notifications, because it's part of how we got here. Left align. I am so happy about this. Phones are too big for us to pretend that the modal is this big centered thing that needs everything centered within it. The old UI for this type of thing really felt like it was from the small phone era. This, in some ways, to me, feels like the true death of the iPhone mini, but it looks so much better. I am immediately preferring the new look. I like the roundedness. I know that these edges don't match, and I care so much less than I thought I would. I am actually very, very happy with this UI. Everyone will come around. They always do. I know how this works. I've also seen the leaks for the iPhone 17 and thought it was the ugliest thing in the world. Now those leaks seem confirmed. We'll see how I feel when the phone comes out, but I've had so many times where I looked at an Apple design, I was like, this sucks, I hate it. And then once I use it, I come around. But this is better. As Juan, the one who shared this, says, it reads faster, it's lower cognitive load, and anchoring is an accessibility win. Cool. We've now covered all the UI stuff. I probably need to do markers in this video for people who don't want this part and wanted to skip to the fun tech. I am sorry to those who just went through all of this when they actually care more about Xcode and the new container stuff. Let's start with the container stuff because it's actually pretty fun. First off, I love that we're seeing more Apple on GitHub. It's always been rare to see them pop up, and it's always been in the weirdest places too. Like I remember a while back, there was this weird developer experience account on GitHub that made a PR to OBS, the Open Broadcast Suite, the tool I'm using to record this stream right now, that was meant to massively improve the quality of screen capture on macOS by using the new macOS screen capture APIs. It seems like they made the PR because they were using OBS as a benchmark for a lot of the stuff. And they made a real PR. It didn't get merged, but it was referenced heavily with the one that was merged. They didn't file any updates. They didn't respond to any requests for comment or questions. It was this weird, let me see if I can find it. So it was Developer Ecosystem Engineering. It's this weird, spooky account from Apple that didn't seem real initially, but it very clearly is. It also had a spookier picture before. I know this one's eerie already with the cloud and whatnot, but it was black and weirdly it was like a dystopian Apple logo before. And this is the PR where they improved capture support on macOS. Yeah, they have a weird GitHub presence. It's strange seeing how they pop up throughout the platform. And now they're actually putting things on the official Apple account on GitHub, which is a nice change, including all of Foundation DB, which we'll talk about in a minute. Containerization is the interesting thing that we're here for today, though. Containerization is a Swift package for running Linux containers on macOS. To put it more simply, it is an attempt at recreating Docker in Swift to work better on Silicon Macs. I still remember when I first got my Apple Silicon Mac, it was my M1 Air. Almost everything worked really well by default. The only problem I had was Docker sucked on it initially. And I remember when that first Docker update came out that lets you run Docker on Apple Silicon. And I also remember OrbStack getting a lot of users because they focused on that much more than Docker officially was. I still am on OrbStack when I do need containers, which is honestly not as often nowadays as I would have expected. That all said, a native built-in by Apple that supports Linux. This is kind of their Windows subsystem for Linux alternative, but it's also like a we don't need Docker anymore moment. Very interesting. It's written almost entirely in Swift, which is crazy, but more and more makes sense. I actually got linked an article earlier that I haven't had a chance to read yet. This is from Naman, who, if you guys don't know, is the creator of StyleX, one of the legends of design and performance from Meta, that now works at OpenAI, trying to make the ChatGPT site less slow. And he wrote an article 2 years ago now, Swift is a more convenient Rust. It's been interesting seeing more and more people come around to this. I know Ladybird, for example, went all in on Swift. And it's crazy to see more and more people adopting Swift as their native solution for cross-platform application development. It's fascinating. And this kind of leans into that direction. More and more we're seeing Apple using Swift where previously they would have used Objective-C or C++, not just for building applications, but building all sorts of other things. What's even more interesting is I'm seeing less people adopting Swift UI and more pushback on it as a platform. They're using the old UI kit stuff on top of Swift instead of using the new one because Swift UI has so many problems compared to AppKit just in performance changes with different versions. Yeah, Swift UI is rough. Almost everyone I know that committed hard and has a big app with it is moving off, even more so than React Native, which is funny. But Swift seems like a good enough language. It has its problems, but it's cool to see this type of adoption. The new containerization package will allow you to manage images, interact with remote registries. I'm assuming this is all just Docker compatible. It's all OCI, makes sense. You can create and populate ext4 file systems, which is cool that they're not forcing their bullshit file system into things. I honestly think Apple deserves more credit for the insane things they've done with file systems. They did a rolling release where they ported every person's iOS device to a different file system, which is just crazy if you think about it. To install an update on your phone that rewrites all of the partitions on your phone. And the fact they did that as a rolling release. A small group of users and slowly more and more would just install an iOS update and get their file system rewritten. They know this stuff well. It's cool to see them embracing file systems that aren't within their ecosystem in order to make this work right. Netlink socket support, optimized Linux kernel for fast boot times. Interesting. Did they make their own fork of the Linux kernel? Yeah, this is an optimized kernel configuration to produce a fast and lightweight kernel for container use. Fascinating. This is probably where all that C code is if you were looking for it. spawn lightweight virtual machines and manage the runtime environment, spawn and interact with containerized processes, and if you do need x86, Rosetta 2 lets you run AMD 64 x86 containers on Apple Silicon. Cool stuff. They're also using protobufs as well. This is kind of funny when you think about it. It's so un-Apple. Like, this is Apple embracing Linux on macOS with an open source developer tool hosted on GitHub, and its integration communication layer is Google's gRPC protobuf layer. The amount of things that I never would have thought I'd see Apple do here is kind of crazy. And I'll hit the star button. I want to be here. This does kind of feel like Apple's developers moment in a lot of ways. But they're also really behind. Oh, actually, one last thing on the Swift and containerization stuff. Foundation DB is an underappreciated project, mostly because it's a weird project. It's Apple's DB KV store chaos Apple. It's open source. It's written in C++. It's pretty cool database. Not the most reliable or performant, not a lot of options for hosting in different ways. It's really focused on shared nothing. So if any one piece dies, the rest stays alive. It also works natively on your devices, which is something they like a lot. Right now, it's largely C++, but there have been rumblings that more and more they plan to start rewriting core parts of it in Swift, which is fascinating. It seems like they're really starting to commit to Swift as like the native platform language instead of it just being for applications. Now we need to talk about video games. I know not every one of you is a gamer, but statistically speaking, most of you probably are. I've seen the numbers. The changes that they're making to Game Porting Toolkit 3 and the game platform with Metal on macOS is subtle but cool. They're finally allowing for multi-frame gen and their equivalent of DLSS, where it can generate in between frames to keep your frame rate higher. And apparently GPTK3 is even easier to port games with. That said, I know almost no game developers who are using this to port games. I mostly know a bunch of third parties who are using a bunch of different additional software and hacks in order to port games that are not going to ever be ported to macOS to get them running. I know my intern, for example, got a bunch of different games running on his Mac through hacks to GPTK, even though none of them will ever officially be supported. So that's cool, but it's nowhere near as cool as the much better way to play games on mobile, which is WebGPU. It's kind of a joke because we're not there yet, but I really hope that we get there. There have been some big changes to WebGPU and WASM recently that are making it more compelling as a platform for game development. If you're not familiar with WebGPU, it's what it says. It lets you have native GPU access effectively through the web. I hate that it's kind of memed here right now, but the changes that are happening are making it a lot less memey. In particular, the big change here is you no longer have to go turn on some weird hidden flag to use it in Safari. So mobile games with WebGPU are now a real possibility once this iOS update ships. What's more cool is actually a change that Apple had nothing to do with. Previously, WASM plus WebGPU had a really, really hard limit of 4 gigabytes of memory usage in Chrome. This greatly restricted the quality of what you could do with the WebGPU side. Like, you can make some small indie games and throw them in there, which is cool. What Google just changed very, very recently is they bumped the limit to effectively be unlimited. It might be soft capped at 16 gigs by default, but I'm not even sure about that. All I know is that I've talked to some companies that went from ignoring WebGPU to being all in on it because the 4 gig limit has been removed. So this era is happening. It's really cool to see. Over the last couple months, WebGPU went from a meme to an actual viable technology to the point where we're seeing 3JS getting hyped about it on Twitter. So fingers crossed, we're going to see some massive improvements to what people do with WASM and WebGPU and building these types of deep interactive experiences in the browser. That's not the end of the JS embrace from Apple, though. Although they did make fun of React Native a bunch during their weird developer platform thing, they did also make some cool changes for us JS devs. Swift 6.2 obviously has all the weird concurrency performance things that make your code throw a ton of lint errors now. According to every Swift dev I've talked to, this has been a nightmare of an update. But more importantly, they added their own interoperability with languages like C++, Java, and JavaScript, as well as proper support for WebAssembly. That is really cool, like super cool. That you could compile Swift to WebAssembly and run Swift code in the browser properly is an official standard. This is an interesting embrace of the web. I really hope this doesn't mean they're going to go rewrite the Apple Music web app again. It's currently in SvelteKit. I hope they don't try to rewrite it in Swift. We'll see where that goes. But Yeah, interop is cool. I'm guessing they were jealous when they saw how good the JSI bridge stuff has gotten in React Native, and they wanted to make sure it can go both directions, which makes sense because right now, a lot of the stuff we're doing in React Native to make it so performant is on the Objective-C side, so they have to place and catch up now. Speaking of catching up, it looks like they're finally at least starting to improve the flow of using AI tools in Xcode. There were some rumors floating around earlier this year that Apple was working with Anthropic on AI coding tools for Xcode. So they could like vibe code apps and make changes, stuff like think Cursor, but for Xcode. If you know anything about Apple, in particular about Xcode, you know that it basically just doesn't ever move. It's like super, super slow to move. I have heard some crazy things from internal people at Apple. I can't share too much of it because you guys know how annoying Apple is about leaks. What I will say, to put it simply, apparently the current Xcode like code base started from Next, the company that was bought by Apple because Steve Jobs started it to build software because Apple software was falling apart. So yeah, Apple was so bad at software at the time that when they bought Next Step, they took the entire dev ecosystem that had been built for the new Steve Jobs compute platform and used that to start the new developer kit for Macs. And that's still what they're based on top of to this day. It's still full of old broken code from the old Next Step project. And there's a couple things in my life that I really, really desperately wish would be rewritten. The biggest one is most of the Adobe suite, but that'll never happen, so I'll just keep making fun of them. Xcode is right up next to them on that list, though. It's rough. Every time I open Xcode, I hate it more and more. And it feels like they do too, because Xcode gets so little love. Historically, Apple's strategy has always been, it's okay to be late. And I generally think that's a good strategy. I hope you guys have heard me say this enough times by now, but being early is usually worse than being late. If you were super committed that mobile apps are the future of how people are going to use the internet, communicate, and like experience the world, way back, like before the iPhone was out, you knew mobile was the future. So you decided to go all in. You're going to give up on building websites. You're going to give up on building desktop apps. You're going to go all in on mobile. You're going to be the world's best Java applet developer for the Nokia N-Gage and the BlackBerry. How much better off are you than somebody who started when the iPhone came out? Or better, somebody who started 2 years after the App Store came out, 3 years after the iPhone came out. You had a 5+ year lead on that person, but you're still behind because you picked the wrong thing and you have to unlearn that, get over it before you can embrace the new thing. So usually being late is a pretty good thing. But there is such a thing as too late, especially in a market that's moving as fast as the AI developer world is. I still remember last year when at the GitHub conference, they announced that they would allow for Claude support inside of Copilot. And when that happened, my thought was, wow, I can't believe GitHub is this late to that. I understand why they're doing it, but they're so far behind already. That was almost a fucking year ago. Apple is so behind on the AI race, it's insane. There are so many stories coming out now about the absurd levels of behind that they are, like execs getting ousted and fired and shit. And it really shows when you see the things that they're changing here. They almost got like a little bit of what Cursor does. The biggest change that they introduced with writing code with intelligence in Xcode is that you can bring your own models now. Apparently the UI for it's really broken. I'm scared to hit play on this video because, I don't want to get DMCA'd, and Apple is very aggressive with the DMCA trigger finger, as I've learned over time. And here, you can manually add different models. Apparently, you have to copy paste the URL yourself, and if you don't know what you're doing, you'll do the wrong one. I read a lot of people on Reddit who are very confused, like, is this via MCP? No, that's not how any of this works. You can't set up any custom model provider. Tried OpenRoute or OpenAI, even locally hosted models. You're using the wrong URL, bud. Someone who couldn't get it working calling API.Anthropic, yeah, because you need to hit the OpenAI compatible URL. It's just, the whole ecosystem is behind. It's no longer just Apple, it's the devs that are building on Apple and building with Xcode. Everyone in that world is just so far removed, it hurts. A thing I've said a lot, because I think about this too often, if you have a spectrum where you have back-end devs on one side, and we have front-end devs on the other side, where do you think mobile developers fit? I used to think mobile would fit somewhere between the two, because mobile requires you to do things with native technologies. You're building into the platform directly, calling system code. but you're also building a user experience. You're trying to make something that users will interact with. What I've learned over time is that mobile app devs don't fit between these two. They are as far from front end as from back end. Mobile devs are scared of the word server. If you say it too loudly near them, their brains shut off. Mobile devs are the reason why Firebase still exists. Mobile devs don't like going outside of their bubbles, especially the platform that they are on. If you want to hear somebody talk just nonstop shit on Apple, go find an Android dev, not an Android contributor. I actually find the Android contributors are pretty smart, and honestly, a lot of them use iPhones, funny enough. But Android mobile app developers, they will have some of the most thought out and diluted takes on Apple, and vice versa. If you ask somebody who spends their life in Xcode about Android, they'll either have nothing to say or really bad and stupid things to say. I am proud that I don't build mobile apps enough to be in that bucket anymore, and I can talk shit on both because both of those ecosystems are garbage right now. Android Studio has somehow gotten slightly better than Xcode, but that's like we're measuring two different types of shit and asking which is shittier at this point. They're all so far behind, it's hilarious. That all said, I thought of this spectrum as like how you think about technologies things, like you're scared of servers if you're a mobile dev and whatnot. What I've realized is there's also kind of a normal curve here for other stuff. And I'll call this the like new tool adoption curve. The thing that we care about here is specifically AI. New tools, technologies, languages, and whatnot are much more likely to be adopted in the middle here than on the sides. What I've seen that's been interesting is like this, where the more you go into front end, the more willing you are to embrace. But as soon as you go into mobile, you just don't know what's going on. The amount of mobile devs I've talked to that just don't know anything about like basic editor behaviors and flows, or like tab complete in their code tools, or even just basic like terminal etiquette. It's so common. And I think we're seeing that now more than ever, because if you take something like an Apple dev, not somebody building for Apple, but somebody working at Apple, I used to think they were still between here too. And what I've learned is it's even worse. The official Apple engineers are even further along on the spectrum. And it's bad. This is how I genuinely feel about the curve of willingness to adopt new things. It's very bad once you go into this world. And while it is cool to see Apple finally allowing you to bring other models, a feature that literally everything in my life has had now for a long ass time, it still feels so late. And the people who are trying it out are so clueless that I don't know jack shit about it. I can't even try it myself because I'm not going to install the most recent macOS beta in order to get the Xcode beta in order to try this, which is just so absurd if you think about it, that in order for me to try this new feature in Xcode that might make my editing experience better, I have to make my entire computer less stable. That is such a dated way of thinking. It's insane. That level of like cohesion has historically been a big benefit to Apple because they know the platform really well and they have control of that platform. But we're starting to see the cost of that walled garden more and more every day. And I think the AI race has really emphasized that. Speaking of which, the new foundations model framework, this one hurts. One of the things that Apple cares a lot about with AI is making sure that it can run well on your device so that it can be private. As soon as you're sending all the data to the cloud in order to do AI stuff, the privacy angle is dead. And Apple cares a lot about privacy and protecting your data where it makes sense to. As such, Apple's model development has largely been focused on small models that you can run on your device offline. Cool, except for the fact that these models are really out of date now. When they dropped, they were okay. Since then, it has gotten terrible. And now with the foundation model framework, you can access them via the APIs in iOS. That part is actually kind of cool because there are way better models you can run locally on your iPhone, but those models are often pretty big, like 1 to even like 5 gigabytes. And we already have problems with how big the apps on our phones are. Imagine that we're using, I don't know, let's say Twitter wants to have a better offline experience. So the Twitter app adds their own foundation model inside. So like the Twitter app, and they decide, you know what? We want to make sure that Grok works offline. So we're going to add Grok 3 Mini or some other local model to the app. Now you have like 4 gigabytes of local model, and you have like 300 megabytes of app. Now imagine you copy paste this across every fucking app you have on your phone. You end up with the like Call of Duty on Xbox problem where every game is so big, you're just out of space immediately and you have to pick between the 3 of the big 10 games you want to have installed. So what if we just share the model across apps? Apple will never let us do that. Let's be real here. It'd be really cool if you could have the equivalent of something like Ollama, which if you're not familiar, Ollama lets you easily install and run different models locally on your computer, and then let other apps hook into that Ollama instance that you're running on your machine. Apple will never let you do that on iOS. I'm surprised they let us do it on macOS, honestly. But it would be so cool if you could have Ollama running on your phone, not like always running in the background, but as a curated set of different models, and then different apps can use them. But Apple does not understand the ecosystem well enough to do this, so instead, they put the Apple Foundation models here instead. And now apps can call Apple's model directly instead. So you can trim this 4 gigabytes of used space, not have to include any of that, and just hit the foundation model directly. The problem is those foundation models are not very good. So what all of these apps are going to do instead is they're going to go to the cloud to do the inference. So just imagine this as an app dev. I'm building Twitter for AI or whatever. I'm building a Twitter app and I want to have an AI feature in it. My options are 1, bundle a huge model in my app. Now my app's going to be like 4 gigs. It's way harder for people to install. It's way harder to get started with. People are going to hesitate to do it in the first place. So option 1 is that we bundle that huge model in the app. Option 2, use Apple's foundation models that are already on device. This seems really promising, except for the fact that those models suck. So if the quality of the inference here is like 4 out of 10, the quality of the inference with Apple's is probably going to be like 2 out of 10. Thankfully, both of those will cost you no money on inference, but the quality of experience for the users and the quality of the generated stuff will go down massively as a result. And then we have option 3. Just hit a better LM in the cloud. The quality spectrum here is much wider. You can pick to an extent. That said, you now have to eat costs. So the quality that you can get here is way higher. The amount of footprint on device is way lower. You can't run it offline, which means you can't use it when your internet connection isn't there or is bad, but it will use way less battery on your device. But it also costs you money when people do inference. But a lot of those options are really cheap now. Like Flash 2.0 is better than basically any model you can run on your phone, and it's hilariously cheap. So if these are your options, you're going to go with this one over and over. And Apple has to make some significant changes if they want us to actually use the phone processor to do our inference, because these options suck. What would be way cooler, Apple will never do it, but my dream would be that when I install an app, there's effectively a registry of different models that my phone can run. And if it asks for a specific model, my phone doesn't have it, it will download it in the background and put it in this like containerized model runtime. And then I can call to it when I need it. And then those can be shared across different apps. I honestly don't see any other way for Apple to make us run our models on our devices, which sucks because Apple has a huge potential win here. The most powerful compute that most people have is their iPhone. Like if you own an iPhone and a computer, your iPhone is probably more powerful than the computer unless you bought a recent powerful M series Mac. And even then, it probably gets updated every 4 to 5 years. I know a lot of people that are on a 5-year-old Mac and a 2-year-old iPhone. Your iPhone, if it's newer, is probably faster than your Mac is. So for a lot of people, the most powerful computer in their life is their phone. And it can run really good inference if the right models are being used on it. I've seen some crazy stuff happening on mobile platforms with this. Apple has the best, what I would call edge compute network for AI because the edge is in my pocket. I have the thing right here that can run compute for models relatively well. And in order for them to take advantage of that win, they have to fix all of this shit. And they are just moving far too slow to do that. It's just like they're a year behind the slow players right now. And I have no idea how or if they will catch up. They're too busy trying to fix Siri to do any of this. Speaking of Apple being super behind on AI, they finally explained in an interview why Siri is taking so long to get updated. Federici admitted that the first generation architecture that Apple's been developing for the personalized Siri features was too limited, which prevented the features from reaching the company's high quality standards. By spring of this year, Apple decided that it needed to fully shift Siri to a second generation architecture that it had been planning in order for the personalized features to reach a quality level that meets customer expectations. That's why they delayed for up to another year. Reminder that the big thing the guy in charge of Siri did after over a year and a half of work was trim the word hey from hey S word. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to trigger your random stuff in your apartment, but it's hilarious that it took them that long to just do that change. They need to fully upend how this stuff is working. There's a joke at Apple right now. The team is called AIML, and they joke the team is aimless with AIML capitalized because it's just not going anywhere. There's no direction, and it's just broken. And Apple Intelligence is as vague and empty a term as a lot of the old AI hype stuff was back in the day. It's kind of funny that it feels like Apple is now bought into the AI hype, but they've yet to buy into AI itself, which is weird. Apple normally does the opposite. They get into the thing without the hype. Now they're doing the hype without the thing, and it makes me concerned. Oh, also, they're copying Raycast too. Apple. Breaking news, just saw this after filming. We'll sneak this in whenever it fits. Thank my editor for figuring that all out. Familiar logo. It's the same weird fucking logo that came from that GitHub account. The strange, I had terms for it before. I don't remember what they were. Regardless, apparently Apple is planning to phase out Rosetta 2. For those who aren't familiar with Rosetta, the original Rosetta was what allowed for the PowerPC software built for Macs to work on Intel-based Macs. It was a huge part of why they could make that transition. Obviously, a parody on the Rosetta Stone where they can translate between different languages. In that case, they're translating between different CPU architectures, which is really, really cool. Rosetta 2 was built to allow for us to take those x86 applications and run them on our Apple Silicon machines. This piece of tech was essential for us being able to make the move from Intel to Apple Silicon and not have every single thing break. It was so good when they dropped this. And I was blown away that Rosetta worked as well as it did on my M1 Air. Intel programs on my M1 Air ran as well on that base tier M1 laptop as they did on my maxed out MacBook Pro 16-inch Intel box that I had gotten earlier the same fucking year. It's kind of crazy. Rosetta 2 isn't just software, by the way. It's also some really cool things they did on the CPU level in order to simulate specific memory stuff that x86 does that ARM doesn't, so that it would run better when you used x86 applications on an Apple Silicon Mac. They've been maintaining it for a while, but I've actually went out of my way on most of my Macs to avoid installing Rosetta for as long as I can because Intel processes use much more energy and run a bit worse than the ARM equivalents. If we look at my activity monitor right now and we go to the CPU section, we can sort this by the kind. And we can see I have some random XPC thing and some synthesizer that are Intel. I don't even know what the fuck this is. Yeah, it's all audio toolbox stuff. So this is just all for my audio software. Literally every other process on my computer is running on Apple Silicon. So Apple killing Rosetta is scary, but it gets way less scary when you realize basically everything's already been ported and they're waiting until 2028 to discontinue it. And apparently they're going to keep a subset. Rosetta was designed to make the transition to Apple Silicon easier, and we plan to make it available for the next 2 major macOS releases through macOS 27 as a general-purpose tool for Intel apps to help developers complete the migration of their apps. Beyond this time frame, we will keep a subset of Rosetta functionality aimed at supporting older, unmaintained gaming titles that rely on Intel-based frameworks. So it looks like Rosetta will be mostly deprecated, and there will just be a little bit left for gaming back compatibility, because I don't even want to think about trying to get DirectX games from olden times running without it. Maybe they're keeping that, but this kind of is the end of Intel Macs. macOS 26 Tahoe, the one they announced at this conference, is the last OS update that they will give to Intel Macs. And I'm honestly surprised they're even doing that. This is that 16-inch MacBook I was talking about. I spent like $4,000 on that thing, and it ran worse than my $1,000 MacBook Air that I got the same year, and I'm still mad about that. There is cool stuff happening, but it really feels too little too late. And until we see like a real deep dive on unscrewing the state of the AI stuff, until Xcode gets like a ground up rewrite or gets unbundled to the point where we can use parts of it in better tools, until Apple doesn't have this death grip on how we're supposed to use the platform and stops shaming us for using it in different ways, and treating people who use the platform through React Native the same they treat people who use it not at all with Flutter. And until they stop doing weird stuff like canceling the podcast they normally go on after WWDC because they're scared of being blasted by the public and by the interviewer about the bad decisions they're making for developers. Until all of this changes, it kind of hurts to be a dev building for Apple, which is funny because devs still love Apple. I'm not going to move off my MacBook anytime soon. I did recently try with a framework, and as great of a computer as it is, I just need macOS to do my job. It makes my life so much easier still. It's hard to fathom what my life would be like without using Apple devices every day, but I've never been less interested in using Apple's tools and toolkits to build things for my iPhone. I dream of a world where building a mobile app is as easy as it is to build a website, and Apple seems still to be just opposed diametrically to that idea. I hope they change their mind. I hope they wake up to the reality that mobile will die if they're not careful. But right now, it feels like they're playing catch up to a thing they don't understand. And I'm curious how you guys feel about this. Am I too concerned, or is this a real problem? Let me know what you think. And until next time, I hope your Xcode files build.